I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio by local author Leonora Langley. Leonora, welcome to West Kent Radio.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Lovely to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you. We've been chattering away, haven't we?
We have.
Like we're old friends.
Absolutely.
We feel like we've met in another life, don't we?
We probably have.
We're kindred spirits. So, Leonora, you brought along your book, and it's fabulous. It's if perhaps a little controversial, who knows? We shall have a chat about it. So the book is entitled Let the Souls of Our Children Sing. It's an interesting title. It asks the question, are we failing our children by not being receptive and responsive enough to their feelings and emotions? Now, that's a big question. Are we?
I think all of us want to do the very best for our children. I think that's innate within us. But it's the unconscious stuff of our own childhood experience that often affects the way we treat our children. I think generally in our lives, especially with social media, that we're not allowing children to express their internal life. It's all about external validation today. And I think we need to get back and realise that it's our soul development that is so important in our lives, our soul journey that we take from the cradle to the grave. And we all yearn for emotional sustenance, especially in the first 18 months of life, when we're in an almost womb-like state. I think that a child needs to be held to the mother's breast. The mother needs to look into the child's eyes, and there needs to be that really strong connection that they're safe in a world where they might feel a little unsafe after being cosseted inside the womb.
So is that not just automatic? Does that not happen naturally?
It obviously should happen,
yes.
But I think sometimes it doesn't, sadly. John Keats said that the world is a veil of soul-making. And I believe that the soul is the author of our lives. It's a sort of a luminous force that inspires and guides us. And I use the title, Let the Souls of Our Children Sing, because I think we owe it to our children to let them sing. I can remember at Princess Diana's funeral, at the eulogy from her brother, where he spoke of Diana wanting that for her boys, to allow their souls to sing. So I think that we do the very best we can, but I think we all of us need to raise our consciousness just to another level to make sure that's happening. Because we get carried away with life, especially during the pandemic. We've all been a bit dumbed down. And we have a real chance now to reconfigure things. We know that at the base of our lives, the most important thing is our relationships with other people, especially with our children. And I just don't think we can do enough for them. Yes, we mustn't pamper them, we mustn't cosset them too much because they've got to go out into the world by themselves ultimately. But I do think those first few years of childhood are absolutely imperative to their well-being.
That's interesting. So do you think that society, or we as a society, are failing our children?
I think we could do better. I think there are an awful lot of parents who are aware of everything that I've spoken of and will do the very best they can. Children come through us, we don't own them. So they've got to have autonomy, we've got to give them independence, we've got to allow them to fulfill their soul's journey. And I'm much more keen on the word guidance rather than discipline. Not sure about the word discipline. As long as we give them unconditional love from the get-go, I think we're on the right road. But life is so frenetic today, especially with women out in the workplace, that some women can't wait to get back into the workplace. And I think they sometimes probably forget that if they're bringing another human being into the world, that child has to feel safe. And I think there's no closer bond than between the mother and the child.
And I suppose it's a society problem as well. The family group it's different. It's changed. Society has changed. The way a family is structured. That normally it's the mother, the father, the children. That doesn't seem to be as strong as it was in the past. And families there's all sorts of mixtures of families. And you talk about a child maybe from 0 to 5, and then once they begin their education, it's not just the parents' responsibility, it's the school's responsibility also, and that's a whole different situation, isn't it? So do you think the emphasis of the way that we educate our children, we've got that wrong somehow? Is that
I think we need to be aware of what you're talking about, constant change, especially since the pandemic. Who would have thought 2 years ago that we would be going through this extremely challenging time in our lives where children have been denied social access. They've seen people with masks on, which is a barrier. They've had to social distance themselves from all their friends, which is massive for a young person. They love the friendships that they form at school. And because they've been denied that, a lot of children they have no escape or relief from unhappy home lives. So I was on a bus at the weekend and I witnessed such a sad scenario. A little girl, no more than 5, was travelling with her parents, and they were both being verbally and emotionally cruel to her throughout the whole journey. I wanted to intervene, but I didn't think it was safe. She looked utterly bewildered, this little girl. She was doing absolutely nothing wrong as far as I could see, and there was no one there to defend her. Now, if that's going on in public, we can only imagine just how much abuse goes on behind closed doors.
Yeah, I remember the days, walking around the supermarket watching children batter their children. I mean, literally hitting their kids.
Yes.
And we don't see that anymore, mercifully, which is a good thing. But you're right, emotionally, the way that people speak to their children is disturbing, isn't it? And you're right, if you're seeing that in public, what's happening behind closed doors?
Absolutely. I argue in my book that while children come through their parents, as I said earlier, they cannot be considered their property or possession, to bend their minds, bodies and spirits at will. And for those children who do receive parental abuse, they don't have a choice but to bond and love their persecutors. So young people tend to think that they are the ones to blame for any conflict and will love their parents no matter what they do to them or what they say, because children seem to innately want to please. So it's so sad when you see that great opportunity for a wonderful relationship, a magical relationship between a parent and child, when it's being denied.
It's difficult times, isn't it? Parents are under a lot of pressure.
Of course they
financially, both parents usually have to work.
Yes.
Juggling all the balls,
Yep.
It's hard to make time for your child's emotional well-being, perhaps. Let's stop for a quick break, and then we'll talk more about that. Interesting. Okay, I'm chatting to Leonora Langley, the author of Let the Souls of Our Children Sing, and we've been talking about some interesting topics here, Leonora. I want to talk a bit more about education, because I think that does have quite a big bearing on our children, doesn't it?
Of course it does.
So do you think the emphasis on academic achievement is too far that way now? We're not looking at
I think it's always been that way since the 1870s.
Yes, I'm sure you're right. Yeah.
The emphasis has always been on cognition and logic, because it can be counted and measured. We need much more emphasis on soul development, which is beyond measure. So we need to help children develop greater self-awareness, self-esteem, and radical self-love. That may sound a bit extreme, but I think it's so. I think we need to help our children work towards reaching self-actualization, described by Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, both of whom were humanistic psychologists. We need to develop the fully integrated child, a balance between the intellectual, the social, the physical, the spiritual, and of course the emotional. But that doesn't happen in schools much. I can see that teachers have such an overloaded curriculum that it's very difficult to achieve that. But children who have been denied true emotional bonding with their parents need to have it somewhere. So for me, I think all learning needs to have an emotional base. Compassion from the teacher. Love from the teacher, not the love that you feel for your child or for your partner. The agape love that the Greeks talk about, the unconditional positive regard. So I think teachers need a strong psychological input in their training. Very often, postgraduate students who only have 1 year of training are denied all psychological element to their training. And that seems very harsh. They might be very good at teaching their subject, but if they don't know how to deliver it through love, feeling and passion. I remember when I was a teacher, if I didn't grab the children in the first minute of the lesson, then I'd lost them, basically. You've got to engage with them fully, and you've got to find a sort of a reciprocity, a co-creative approach to teaching. I don't like the them and us approach. They've got to know that you have been a child, that you know what it's like to walk in their shoes.
I see what you're saying. I mean, when I was at school, I was terrified of a lot of my teachers. They meant to frighten us. You know, particularly my maths teacher. He loved to torture the children
Yes.
and embarrass us if we got a question wrong and whatever. And for me, I have a mental block with mathematics, and I'm sure it's down to that. I was scared stiff of the teacher. It was deer in the headlights every time he asked me a question. My brain just went completely out the window then, and it was a scary experience. And I was almost physically sick before a maths lesson because I was so scared of how it was going to go.
Yes.
So I'm sure you're right there.
Yes, I went to see Matilda.
Oh yes,
in the West End
It was
for my birthday last
fabulous.
week. And I couldn't believe how similar what Roald Dahl was trying to inject into his beautiful play. It started off as a book, a book, and then it became probably a play, and then a musical, and it's been a film. It's been everything because people really relate to the subject matter.
And how wonderful Miss Honey is, and how
I love Miss Honey.
How she learns so much from Miss Honey because she teaches it with kindness.
Yes.
Okay, but I'm going to throw you a curveball really about this because I know there's probably people listening to this today saying, "Oh, for goodness' sake, we're breeding a snowflake generation. We're far too soft on children as it is compared to the way we used to be taught in school. You know, what sort of adults are they going to become if we don't toughen them up? How are they going to survive?"
If they get that in early emotional input, then they'll be fine to deal with almost anything in life. What needs to be integral to all learning is the development of internal resources that children can draw upon in terms of inevitable adversity and challenge. They're going to get plenty of it. We've got to let them know that life's not easy, that they will be faced with challenges. They will be faced with people who aren't always very nice. So it has to be a balance. But I still say that kindness, compassion and love will equip them later on to deal with almost anything.
That's a nice way to end the interview. We've run out of time, Leonora. I'm so sorry. There were other things we were going to talk about, social media. There's a lot of other... You have to come back.
I'd love to.
Come back and we'll talk a bit more about this. It's very interesting. Where is the book available?
Well, most of my sales seem to be on Amazon. It's also available through my publishers, Austin Macaulay, Waterstones, W.H. Smith, all good booksellers. And it's doing extremely well as far as I know. I'll know more in about a month, apparently. I'll know about the sales.
It's an interesting subject, and I shall certainly read that, and it'll help with my grandchildren. Brilliant. Leonora, thank you so much for coming in. It's been great to see you, and I hope the book goes well. We will put the interview on our Listen Again feature so that you can listen to yourself and anyone else who wants to listen to this interview. It's really interesting. Thank you very much for coming in, Leonora Langley. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.